All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Intelligent Idea Talkers podcast, and we are the most intelligent idea talkers that you have ever heard.
Ever. We ain't got no answers for you.
Ever. For the week of Sunday, January 28th, 2018, second cast of the new year. Yeah. I'm your host, D.
This is Juice.
It's your boy, Jay.
And we back for episode 32. God damn. What's been going on, fellas, man? Back on the air.
Yes.
There was a word that we had to reference. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Let's get a toast.
The Intelligent Idea Talkers toast right there.
Wasn't there a word that we said you had to say on the cast today, man? What was that word you said?
It was existentialism.
Yeah, okay, yes. So existentially, we're back for episode 32. Can you use existential?
You with our existentialist dilemmas.
You can use existential for like almost anything, you know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
baby.
So, existentially, you know, we could start this cast up. You know,
existentially.
Yeah. So, yeah, guys, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Hey, you know what? We went to the National African American History Museum yesterday. It was a beautiful day outside, man.
It was beautiful.
Thank God we went yesterday, and it wasn't today, because it's raining like shit. It's not cold, but, you know, yesterday was just a better day to go.
And all the rest of the week was just cold.
Yeah, for real.
So I feel like, you know, the gods just opened up the skies for us, and it was like come on into the Black History Museum.
Come on into history.
Come on into history.
Get your learn on.
Yeah.
It was a great experience, man. You know what, though? I'm not going to jump off with anything negative. I will say that I watched a couple of reviews when I got home last night, and, you know, before we tell our thoughts on what we thought about the place, and Boyce Watkins had one good point I thought he made. He was like, there was some stuff that you didn't see, you know, right? Like most of the exhibits we saw, we kind of had an idea of those things, but there was some like nitty gritty stuff that we probably don't know, or, you know, I'm not saying conspiracy theory type things, but, you know, there was probably some more grittier stuff we could have saw. We didn't see the whole place. We definitely didn't see the whole place. We were there, I told somebody we were there 4 hours.
I heard on NPR they were talking, they were doing an interview, and who's the guy, not Boyce Watkins, the founder of the museum, I forgot his name, but there was an interview with him, and they were talking about some of the criticism people had, and they were talking about how they didn't have really an exhibit for the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, right? Who was one of the few or only Black Supreme Court justices. He was a clear Republican. Kind of, people had a lot of issues with the way he voted on a lot of things concerning, you know, minorities. But it was pointed out, like, why didn't you have an exhibit on him? And I think the response really was, we can't cover everybody, you know.
True. You know,
but
speaking
I'm like,
of that,
I was kind of
I think there was another review I was watching, and they said there's something like 70 or 75% of the actual artifacts they had to display weren't on display. Like, of everything they collected to put into the museum, I heard they had a lot of it that wasn't displayed.
I definitely noticed a couple. I wouldn't say it was 75% because there was here's the thing.
There's a lot of stuff, but imagine everything they have in there.
Stuff in there.
And the museum is, and the building, when we walked up, is beautiful.
Guys, they have Marcus Garvey's hat. I don't know how you get Marcus Garvey's hat, but they have Marcus Garvey's hat. And if you know what I'm talking about, that's a pretty particular definitive hat for a person to have.
Hell yeah.
Like, I don't know how you get that hat, but it was in there, and I saw it, and I took a picture of it. Marcus Garvey's hat.
I thought it was cool. Like, you walk up, man, and the building looks good. I think I probably went past it before, but the experience of, like, going in, like, the building itself was beautiful, man. It went down 5 stories underneath the ground, which if you didn't do any reading up on it beforehand, which I guess obviously I probably didn't, but you know what? I did when it first came out.
I kind of wanted to be surprised though.
It's been open for what, like a year? Two,
I knew it
2
was
years?
amazing.
1 year.
I wanted to be surprised. Like I enjoyed the fact that, like, I knew it went down. I didn't know it was 5 stories down. I thought it was like a basement, a main floor, and a top floor.
And you imagine they have a basement, they have a storage, you know, where they
But it just goes to show how deep it goes. This is how deep it is.
That's tight though.
Yeah, 5 stories deep, man.
Beautiful looking building, man. It had to cost some money. I was trying to look at the list of all the benefactors who donated money or put up money for it.
Oprah.
Yeah, and I think they said that museum cost over $250 million or something like that. It was some crazy number like that, man.
They had a lot of fraternities and sororities.
Which is ridiculous to me almost.
Fraternities and
because
sororities who put money
that
into
beautiful building that you can go to and experience anytime, right? And we're definitely going to go back another time or two to really soak everything in. they spend money more on movies than that. They spend more money on Star Wars than they spend on that goddamn museum, man.
Really?
If
I guess if
that museum was
I heard that
$250,
I heard that they had an
$250.
unlimited budget essentially for Star Wars.
if they had if that museum was $250 million to build,
that would have been a great segue.
they spend $300 million on the production of a movie. You know what I mean? A movie like Star Wars: The Last Jedi had to have an unlimited budget, man. Maybe almost unlimited, because look how beautiful that shit looked. You know what I mean?
It was.
It was a beautiful looking
I
movie.
I feel like I should have saw it in 3D.
Okay, but not to get on Star Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
back to topic.
I was gonna say, man, like some of the things that they collected over the years, especially a lot of these artifacts, like I'm almost curious to see how they even got them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like,
They had
how?
things in there I never heard of. Like,
I mean, they're collectors
they
all
went
over.
so deep into history, man.
Mhm.
The best part of it really is that, like, there is that much history to dive into, and I felt like that was one of the biggest, like, most defining parts for me. It was like, you can have a 5-story deep museum full with the history of particularly African Americans in American history, and it goes to show that this has always been a double-sided coin, right? Like, while we've had for the last 100+ years museums of painting museums and American history museums, where the section was for black people was a corner of a room, and they pointed out maybe a couple of people, like,
or a month out of the year
Yeah.
where they would reference, speaking of
and
black
it
history.
always included Thomas Jefferson in reference to it. It is like, but at the same time, we just saw a museum that filled 5 floors. 5 floors,
And even
man.
then, I thought it was rushed.
Yeah, right. And it was so compressed. It was like, man,
and we didn't see
like,
everything.
Each one of those
I saw 2 floors.
assets had so much behind it that we only got to saw a glimpse of.
We
It's
didn't even
just
go
so
upstairs.
deep
We
and
didn't even
rich.
get into the Medgar Evers. It's not Medgar Evers.
James Baldwin.
Emmett Till.
Oh, that's right.
section.
We couldn't
didn't
even get
in
into
there.
that area. The line was like, it was so long. And
The line would have been at least a 40-minute wait.
yeah, it was a long wait just to go see that. And
Yeah, we gotta go.
I feel bad. I wanted to see that.
We definitely got to go back. And I thought it was particularly interesting how they had that section on Thomas Jefferson, though, because everybody knows that he had, have black children. I think they said there's something like they were trying to get the rights to some of his estates or something like that a little while ago, maybe a couple years ago, right? Which, I mean, they would be totally entitled to, right? Their children. But
biologically, yeah.
I thought that was interesting. I'm like, why didn't I see more of that? Because you can't tell me Thomas Jefferson is the only, maybe even U.S. president who had.
I like that they pointed out the hypocrisy between his conversations with Benjamin Banneker.
Mhm.
Like, they pointed out the letters between those two, and they pointed out the distinctions of Thomas Jefferson's hypocrisy. And while we already know what it was, some people, I've seen Thomas Jefferson spun as one of the first people to actually see the value in black people's intelligence. And in the letter to Benjamin Banneker, you see, like, he does acknowledge Benjamin Banneker's intelligence. Just so you know what I'm talking about, they had a kind of a letter back and forth debate where Benjamin Banneker was challenging his position of keeping slaves, and despite his position of still acknowledging that they're intelligent, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that he wrote like all men are created equal, right? And at the same time he still has slaves. So Benjamin Banneker challenged him on that, being an intelligent black American at that point in time. And Thomas Jefferson's response really was that, oh, you're an exception. I mean, he acknowledged Banneker's intelligence, but at the same time, he pointed out, like, yeah, but not the rest aren't like you. Mm-hmm. You're an anomaly. And it's like, you're an outlier, right? And it's like, that's ridiculous when you see how it's changed throughout history, how things have gone, right? You see how absolutely wrong he was, but it was cool because they pointed that out in the museum, and that, to me, it never really came up.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I like how when we first went in, they, I don't know, just picked up on how this was like the first of time that like racial, slavery had kind of shaped the world. Like you had slavery before the transatlantic slave trade, but it was more like
a class thing.
Yeah, it was a class thing. It wasn't so much race. And like I was also surprised to see like
America made slavery definitive, like, made black people in slavery like synonymous.
It was weird to see how like to see it there, like how slavery built the world, man. When they had like this separate display for each country that participated in the slave trade, Portugal, France,
the UK.
And, you know, you always think about England, of course, because that's a relationship between America, England, and the Caribbean. But I mean, it's just like, man, we transformed the world. I mean,
off the backs of slaves,
off the backs of slavery, man.
Those countries prospered.
It's crazy, man, because it's like, what if that didn't happen? What if that didn't happen? Would we still be in the Stone Age, sort of, so to speak? I mean,
potentially. Like, I mean, honestly, like, what's the value of labor, right? Like, what's the value of labor? Like, I think to have a transformed world, I mean, I'm not saying I'm a proponent of slavery, but when you look at the way it panned out, like, there had to be a class system, like, and if slavery, and I'm not saying you already know it's terrible the way they treated black slaves, but black slavery and slavery transformed the world.
It did, literally.
And now, if you want to argue if it was for the better or not,
it's crazy. I
think it's completely subjective.
It's crazy how it all went. It's like
best.
They discovered that these people were down here. They were less technologically advanced than we were. Who was the first country to go down? I mean, was it England? You could probably search it and find. Say England went, right? Then Spain. Let's say, ooh, I'm getting on this shit too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then comes Portugal. Then France. Oh, I'm gonna go down here and rock these. I'm gonna get these motherfuckers too. And it's almost like, can you blame them? Right? That's the. Is it survival of the fittest? You know what I mean? Like, what is this? You know, like, think about all the countries who benefited off of, like, Africa, man. Like, even countries like China and Japan are over there now, and it's crazy, man. Like, imagine if that thing didn't happen.
Wait a minute.
Right?
Good question. So what about like China and like Japan?
They own a lot of property in Africa. They just own land, you know? Like, they get a lot of the ore that you make cell phone batteries and shit with. I think there's something in the iPhone, right? Where like this particular metal comes out of Africa, you know? Like, imagine all the iPhone products, products all around. Yeah.
Like, imagine if like people, if Africans knew how the value of whatever that metal was.
Right.
Like, ooh, all right.
It's crazy, right? And it's like,
about to get into Black Panther right now. So
this shit is all like globalism, man. It's all like
they can have an empire.
It's some of it is so inhumane. You almost wonder, like, is there an Anunnaki presence? Like, is this like, how can you be so inhumane to people? You know what I mean? Like,
I call it sociopathy.
Like, it's wild, man. I wish one thing I'd say about the museum. I wish they would have went into like more in depth about the main countries who were exporting these Africans, like some history behind those countries. You know, it was all up and down the coast, but a lot of the Africans marched from the interior to the coast. You know, like maybe if it went beyond just when the slave trade started. You know what I mean? Like maybe a little section on that. You know, I don't know how they would do that. It was a cool experience, though.
It was definitely a cool experience.
I think there's definitely a lot of stuff they didn't show. There's a lot of stuff that they just didn't maybe
showed,
have room for.
That's true, man. But they showed so much. And like I was saying before, that goes to the depth, man, of the history.
If they try to go into more detail, like, it'd be like 10 stories.
Yeah, man. Like, imagine if they really went back into Africa. Because when we saw, like, when we first walk in, they talk about Africa, right? They talk about different areas in Africa. Talk about some of the influences of African people and acknowledgments of I don't want to say all Europeans, but of other cultures of people on the Africans as they approach them, as they interacted with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, and that was the first section of the first floor. But there's a lot going on there. Like, there was so much going on there. They're not talking about, they didn't go back into Kush or Egypt, or they didn't go way back. But imagine if they had. That would have been another. Of course. If they had.
That would have been another museum.
That would have been another museum, right?
Like, and maybe that has to do with some of the stuff they want to hide.
They had to dig another 3 floors down.
The people who. This is what Boyce Watkins was saying. Like, the people
who. Maybe they do, but I think it was on another floor that we didn't visit.
Oh, that's a good point.
We did not see.
That's a good point. Just so you know, guys.
We saw less than half.
It was so much.
We were there for 4 hours.
A little bit over, but yeah, definitely.
You want to read everything, but you can't. But even in skipping stuff.
No, man, y'all kept rushing me. You know what I mean? I turned around. Jay's like, dude, come on. Man.
I don't want to get lost with all the other group, man. The other group was going.
I know. Everybody was split up.
You were gone.
I will say, though, it was interesting to see that, even though from the beginning, though, up until like even the most recent present day history, like there was always people who was rebelling against the idea of slavery or the idea of inequality.
Right.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yes, absolutely.
Like not only from like the North, but also the South. There were people in the South that were fighting for equality.
And they definitely had a display of like avid abolitionists, people who got killed fighting for the idea that slavery shouldn't exist. So yeah, that's good to point out, Jay, because there always had to be people against it. You know what I mean? Like
no one's
people always saw the
you know
injustices and the inhumanity of it.
It's hard to. It takes a degree of mental gymnastics to ignore the irony of certain situations. And the situation where you're fighting against the British for your independence while still enslaving a whole nother group of people.
And I don't want to give
irony.
I don't want to give too much credit.
Serious.
Because they still had slavery for another 65
no,
years
they did.
after that. Yeah,
they did. And that goes to show that how much people can justify anything, right? You can justify anything.
It's crazy, man. And like speaking of like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Banneker, to take it back for a second, like it's wild, like because there were always people against the ideology of slavery, right? But when Thomas Jefferson was saying that Benjamin Banneker was an exception to the rule, that he was smarter than the rest, it's like you had to know that some people kind of just realized that, man, if we taught the rest of them, how to read and write and whatever, and just educated them, that they could be the same way. But like you just said, you can justify anything. You can justify keeping people ignorant.
They used the Bible. It was like, oh no, this is your God-given role. Right?
That's why you have to see 12 Years a Slave, Juice, because there's one part in there where they first introduced Michael Fassbender. The first time you see this dude, and he's like,
the preacher.
That's the funny thing. He's preaching when he first comes into the scene. He's reading the word of God,
I do like
saying you should be laid with many lashes, and then blah blah blah. That's the word of God, And you're right, man. They use God, and
you could twist ideology to justify anything, man. Welcome to the human condition.
Even nowadays,
and they talked about it actually in the museum. They talked about how the religious groups, religion and church and all that, drove a lot of this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even the slave owners, or maybe the rest of the people in society, is like they believed it as well,
Even nowadays, man, like people use the church to justify hating other groups, man. It's like it's all about this position of exclusion, like we're special and you're not, right? And people like to draw these hard lines in the sand, right, to say we're different from you and therefore we're better than you because of this obscure set of rules written before nobody really knows who really knows, right?
And if you don't like these rules, make your own religion.
Right.
It breaks off into a different sect.
Right.
And even yesterday, I was just talking about when Jay was rushing me. I was looking at the Angola state. It was like a guards tower that they had there, and I saw a documentary on Angola once. It was a converted slave plantation that they converted to a prison. Like it looked sort of like the movie Life. With Martin and it looked sort of like that prison. Like they didn't have fences and shit, and all the guys stayed in these outdoor bunks and fucking wooden cabins and shit. You know what I mean? And it was a converted slave plantation into a prison, man. And even like they had the Jim Crow era section in there, and it's like, man, legislation in fucking Congress was passed, or maybe not even that high. Maybe state legislation in states Congress was passed to support Black people being marginalized and discriminated against. Like they passed fucking laws.
Just look at the past 10 years. The war on drugs.
Yeah, what was that?
Now it's a little more subtle. They'll say a war on drugs, even though we're talking to these motherfuckers over here, Latinos and Blacks.
But if you look at the incarceration rates, right? Blacks are incarcerated 7 times, more than whites, or like their sentences are 5 times as long with the same amount of crime. So
and people don't even take into account the conditions of the war on drugs. Like what conditions are people living in? Like we live in the suburbs, we live pretty, decent, well-off lives, But if you're in the projects, man, I'm not gonna say it was run down like they sell in the movies, but I've been in the projects, man. A couple
I've
of
been in
my
that
homies,
too.
yeah, and it was in the Bronx, man, and it's rough. It's a lot of people. I mean, imagine when there's no money and you're destitute. You just don't have money, man. And I mean,
it's hard to imagine living in that situation. Like we're from Northern Virginia. Like we've had a fairly diverse, really kind of privileged lifestyle in some perspectives, but
I mean,
it's like to live in that kind of tenement in this structured beehive of a residence, man.
And imagine that shit back in like the 50s or the 60s or the 70s. You're going through civil rights and Black Panther marches and people are rioting and shit, and you in the ghetto, you know what I mean? So you're gonna try to get some money. And
At that
drugs
point-
is the easy way to do it.
And you know what? They say that discomfort is one of the main components you need for a revolution. Like people have to be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and the black people in that era were way more uncomfortable than we are now, right? It's like they were
Way more,
they
dog.
were compressed and stepped upon and discriminated
They
against
had
and
a
cursed
section in
at.
there
and-
talking about violence. It was coming out of the Civil War and like into the Jim Crow era when they started the Ku Klux Klan, and like just they had a section on violence. How you were scared most of the time because if you were caught on the wrong side of town, or you could just be doing something and you get lynched or you get fucking beat up, or it's like you were on edge all the time, man.
So
I've
I've heard a lot about these case studies and about historical events. A lot of these literally was just like, oh, someone's claim. There was no DNA evidence. There's no like police report. It was just like,
that,
hey,
the whole Emmett Till
that
thing.
was it. That was it. That guy right there.
The whole Emmett Till thing, she just pointed at him. It was like, he did this and he said this to me. And that cost the guy his life, man.
I thought it was interesting.
And a terrible death.
I thought it was interesting how they pointed out that like, like the violence, like you were scared most days, right? And like, how they always had like these, like the poor whites would get kind of jealous or maybe mad at the community that the blacks were able to build because during that time all you had was each other, you know what I mean? So as soon as you saw a black on the street in fucking 1898, right, you're walking down the street, you see a black dude, you're like, hey brother, what's up, man? You know what I mean? Like, you're on my side. Like, so you had to stick together.
Them, it was like, yeah,
and they were able to build this community and
my position.
gather resources together and kind of take care of themselves. And how that like these white people, now it might not have happened all the time. I'm sure there were times where black people started something with a white guy they saw. Well, fuck you, you know what I mean?
There was something to that. Like, isn't that part of what like Malcolm X was like arguing? He was like, he didn't really care so much for integration, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
It wasn't really his cup of tea. It was more like, look,
I even heard
if you're gonna exclude us, then give us our own place and let us function independently of you. Right? And in that way, and that was what the Black Panthers were arguing as well. It was like, because in that exclusion, your community becomes more tight-knit, right? Whereas
because you have to stick together, man.
when integration happens, you are absorbed into the status quo. People lose, it dilutes your
So this is totally random,
position.
off left field. But like when I hear things like this, it kind of I don't know why, I'm super nerdy. It reminds me of Magneto and Charles Xavier.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? When you talk about like
Magneto's right.
like MLK and like Malcolm X, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, Malcolm X, Magneto right there. He goes,
Even
you know
Cyclops switch sides eventually,
he
man.
goes, we'll have our own island with our people. We don't need these
Genosha.
humans.
Yeah,
And then they burned it down like they did in Oklahoma.
it's crazy.
Maybe that's where it came from. Maybe that's the ideology.
I heard something like
Possibly, dude. Yeah, that's very likely. Because I heard, and I think I brought this up at some point in the past, but I was like, I heard that Stan Lee got the premises of the mutants and at least the political situation of the mutants and the X-Men and Magneto and
Makes sense. though.
Charles Xavier from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the African American struggle and civil rights. He was alive during that time. He watched it.
and they had a
That's
real
right.
Firsthand.
Right.
He watched it.
they had a real avid black following, because I think a lot of black kids, especially back during that time, identify with the mutants. Like, man, they're being excluded for the way that they are, and they can't help that.
help how they are.
So they want to go to their own school and go to their own
There should be a
community,
Stan Lee section.
right? And yeah, I mean, look at even
Or at least the
Wu-Tang.
X-Men.
Look at even Wu-Tang and stuff. They were naming their characters, and it wasn't just that these kids loved, the black kids back then loved black superheroes. I mean, fucking Ghostface Killer moniker is fucking Iron Man. You know what I mean, he references Tony Stark in his songs. Like, how many clips do we hear of this old comic booky clips? Yeah,
That was the whole job for the.
He's a man of steel. Yeah, that shit was hard.
The Iron Man. He had an Iron Man album.
His album called Iron Man.
Iron Man. Yeah.
So they was. I mean, they had a black following, man. Stan Lee's the man, man. We talked about that before, right? Who did you meet, Stan Lee or
Anybody?
who's the guy? Hugh Hefner. Yeah,
Stan Lee.
Lee wins hands down, man.
Yeah,
I'm sitting down with
Stan
Stan
Lee.
I
Lee.
think it'd be a nice conversation.
He'd be the coolest dude.
Like, who's a bigger pimp, Stan Lee or Hugh Hefner? I give it to Stan.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it was crazy. And I heard something like even Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, started to realize that maybe integration wasn't such a good thing. Like maybe if we keep the money in our own community. Imagine if they never integrated.
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen. Like, you know,
you can only imagine, honestly.
I heard something like integration was
went.
actually better for the white community, right? Because coming out of the Depression and the economy's trying to pick back up, you know, we're probably in debt from World War II.
Everybody's plugging into the.
So now you have this whole
taxes.
separate, you know, set of, you know, money system over here that's not spending money in
20% of the population,
right? This other corner of the world. So if they
Untapped
bring
market.
them in, they bring their money to us. They spend it in our stores. It gives us a boost, you know. So you see it in hindsight, and you're like, should we have done that? But at the same time, who doesn't want to go into any fucking IHOP and get something to eat? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to.
And also, there's no telling.
Waffle House, yeah,
there's
right.
no telling how it could have went. Like, at what point would the government have been like, okay, these are foreign agent, but these are foreign agency. These are terrorists or whatever, right? Like, at what point would have the government? You already saw what they did with the COINTEL and how they pretty much took out black leaders. Martin Luther King. And I forgot the other guy's name, but he was taken out by the CIA, one of the Black Panthers. And it was like, well, at what point would it, was that Medgar Evers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like, at what point would that have like turned towards the communities, right? Towards entire groups of people. I don't know. I mean, there's no one telling which way it would have went, because the government, you know, is not your friend.
Right. No, they're not. And it's scary, man. It was definitely an experience. We got to go back because there's so much of the museum that we did not see.
didn't see, guys.
And
but there were so many tidbits in there I learned that either I don't think I ever knew or I forgot. Like, so there was and there were parts that they didn't have. Like, they didn't have the whole section on Liberia. I saw one thing on Liberia. I have it here, and it was mentioned, and it was under the premise of this hat they had. It's called a Gola hat, and this is Gola hat from Liberia, right? So here's what the little panel said underneath it. I don't know what they're called, but it said African Americans moved to Liberia in Western Africa after it was founded by the American Colonization Society. Some travelers willingly, others were transported by the society as part of a plan to remove African Americans from the United States. There they created a free society outside white America. As a member of the Gola people from the Western Liberia made this hat, demonstrates cross-cultural influences and bringing together European style of African materials. Anyway, so the most interesting part of that is the first section, which they didn't. I feel like that should have been a bigger focus. The whole part where they transported a significant group of African Americans from America and moved them to Africa and stuffed them into Liberia. That's a whole thing. There are people in Liberia with names like we have. Like, just regular, like, American names.
Tom Smith.
You know what I'm saying? Like John Henry.
Yeah, John
right?
Wayne.
You know what I'm saying?
Double first names.
Right?
You know what, man?
Michael.
I think we've been podcasting too long.
Will
man, 'cause
Williams.
I was just literally thinking about that, John. Like, you know, but I didn't get to ask the question. Would you have gone back to Africa? Like, say it was 1875, you know, 1880, and, you know, Reconstruction is going on. Fucking Jim Crow is coming in, and you're like, yo, what the hell's going on? Like, I can't get a goddamn house. You know, like, I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to work. These people are fucking being violent towards us, and you got a chance to go back to Liberia. Would you yourself have gone there?
So that's a tricky thing, because
It's hard
when
to
you
ask
look
that
at
question,
what
'cause
happened.
we don't know.
Like, when you look at what happened, like, there was a lot of divisions, I think. Like, I don't know the exact history, and I'm actually looking for a lot of, like, some kind of reading I can do on this where I can find out more, because this is an interesting point in time. But I think there was pushback from the people who actually lived in the area to having all these black people come in. Right? There was some pushback.
But, I mean, Africa is so big. How could you... You could have those Americans come in with the proper resources and relationships and start a community there. You know what I mean?
Oh, can I add something?
Yes!
He was looking at me the whole time.
I was looking at Claudine across the room, like, right? Like, am I getting this right? Because she's originally told me about this, and I saw this in the museum.
First of all, when the African American moved to Liberia, they were not free. They still had to report to the white men when they got there. They still had to live under their rules. And then after a while, they were able to emancipate themselves. But, like, yeah, they were only, like, max 5% of the entire population in Liberia. And they created a system that was also oppressive to the people in Liberia, which led to actual slavery in Liberia by African American imposed onto indigenous people.
See, so that's the part of the tricky
You
part of
fast
it, right?
forward that 200 years, that's what led to the Civil War, because all the indigenous people, all the Liberians, were actually sick of being oppressed and treated like shit by Americans.
Look,
by Black Americans.
Them Black Americans went over there, saw them white dudes, was like, you can't beat them? Join them. I'm going to slave these motherfuckers too.
No.
Give me some slaves.
Damn.
That's fucked up.
Damn.
But it speaks to like the viciousness.
beat 'em?
It speaks to the viciousness of the system itself. You know what I mean? Like you can't just. That's why times were so hard after the Civil War, because you had this system, this economic system of slavery that fed the world, right? And then all of a sudden, okay, that's it.
Goes back to the value of labor. The value of free labor. Like, the value of free labor.
I mean,
even people went there back to the motherland, and they were like, well, we need some free labor, yo. Come on, guys.
Even
Hey, building this house ain't gonna be cheap.
You know what I'm saying? Somebody gotta do it.
The oldest recorded history that we have is the Sumerian text, right? Even those stories say that the Anunnaki needed what? Free labor. So
They needed free labor.
Gestated humans in fucking petri dishes or whatever they did, you know?
Yeah, man.
Which I still
That's a
refute
good
the Anunnaki, because it's like, where's the machinery? That's what I want to know. Like,
maybe it was all biological.
right.
Maybe what's the
maybe got buried.
highest limit of what's our highest
There's a lot of
aspirations
ocean.
to manipulate biology to our whims, right? Like we use machines to do that right now, but what if we could do that without machines, right? What if we just manipulate biology with our minds or whatever technology we have?
Crazy.
So maybe the Anunnaki used.
So even going back to Liberia, you couldn't escape that
Gestation
system
pods.
of slavery. It's like, well, we need free labor.
But
We got guns. Let's go over here to these dudes who got spears and get them to do our shit for us. You know, even
the
if
thing
against their will.
that's interesting though is like people talk about, oh, well, what if we go back to Africa? What if we go back to the motherland and stuff, right? Like, if America is all that you really know, like, how are you going to start all over again in a place that you don't know?
At that point in time, America is your home. I mean, you're several generations removed from African heritage, unless it, you know, a lot of it came up through slavery and, you know, stories were retaught and history was retaught, but a lot of that shit was lost. You know?
I mean, I understand it's like
you
first
didn't
generation.
have your name.
But
Yeah,
if
your
been here for,
grandparents or
like,
great grandparents are still there. You got cousins over there still there. Yeah, you can probably go back.
But like, if
And I mean,
if
imagine-
you've been here for years, then like, that's
Imagine
hard.
keeping in touch with any family members. Like, you probably
Probably
couldn't
not no
find
iPhones
them.
over there.
Yeah.
Nah.
Internet, nah.
This is pre-internet
Ain't no Black
days.
Mirror.
You don't have no phone, nothing. Yeah, how the hell are you gonna find anybody? So literally, you were starting over.
I don't know if you guys have really
WhatsApp.
like been back to your home country or something. Man, I went back to I visited China. I would not want to live there.
No.
Nah, hell
What
no.
part?
I just visited Beijing. I mean, this is like back in like 2009 or something.
That's tight
like,
though. If I want to go to
Because
Beijing.
I want to travel just like everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like the Philippines and just, you know, move around different areas. And like Japan was pretty tight. But I went to China just because why not, right? Everything's made in China. Let's get something cheap over there.
You been to Japan too?
Tiny little bit, just like in the airport area.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that layover.
That counts.
Pretty much. Anyway,
No, it definitely counts.
That counts.
But
That
no,
counts. I was
like,
there.
when I went
Boots
to
on the ground,
when I went to
motherfucker. I
China,
was
though,
there.
like, yo, I don't speak the language proficiently enough to get around, to read books. Like, you know, I have to stop and ask for directions. Like, I wouldn't want to go back.
Pre-GPS days.
Pre-GPS, yeah, no.
How's the cell phone signal out there?
It was all right.
Mm-hmm.
It was all right. Everything was very cheap, though.
I love
It
going
was
to China, man.
But, like,
That's probably cool.
so for me,
I heard
though,
the food was really different. Like American Chinese food is not like Chinese food.
No,
A lot of that food is like.
No, that'd be like saying Taco Bell's Mexican food.
Yeah.
Did you see a video of where like they had this like fucking toad
love
sushi?
Taco Bell.
It was like a big ass like bullfrog, right? And they like cut that shit in half to serve it on a plate, but it was like still alive. Did you see that video? It's like a video on YouTube, man. Go on
What?
YouTube.
You know what? Nah, I'd rather not watch. I don't
Dude,
want
that
to
shit
my
is like
God.
flipping around on the plate.
I
Like
think
a
it's
fucking-
alive?
I don't want to watch
I swear to God, y'all gonna make me find it.
Nah, I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, it was cool, man.
I don't need to watch that.
I kept saying in the
delicious.
museum yesterday, thank God we were born in the 1980s because, you know, just to enjoy this level of freedom, even though we still, you know, especially black men experience a level of discrimination, maybe not so much more racism now. Yeah, it's born out of racism.
You know what?
but
No. You know what? I don't
it's
think so. Because,
discrimination.
like, we live in a very privileged, diverse area. If you travel
Super
an
south.
hour and a half down south.
But when you
I
have
guarantee you'd be different.
Like, there's racism in Norfolk.
definitely. Oh, even in Richmond.
In
yeah.
Richmond, that's right. You lived in Richmond for a while. You know, it's like we
Yeah,
live
yeah,
in
you see
Northern
it.
Virginia. Like we got pretty lucky.
Like, like at my wedding a couple years ago, one of my friends was driving his Toyota to the wedding, and this is only like an hour and a half away. You know what I'm saying?
Those are
And like he
goddamn
pulled up to a
mountains.
red light. He pulled up to a red light. There's a dude in a truck pulled up next to him and looked at him and was like, "Hey, why you driving that Jap car?" And he was like, drove off. And my buddy's white, so he was like, "Really, dude? Really? That's kind of random."
That's the most redneckest of things I've ever heard.
But
that is
this is an hour and a half away from where we live. Like,
So that's the most red.
Did the guy be like, "Yeah"? Just
probably had a banjo in his back seat.
Remember when we were driving through the Shenandoah, coming back from the wedding with that guy? He had a sign in front of his house saying "racist, armed, and proud," and it was like at the stop sign.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Oh damn! Was
That's
that
what
a stop
I'm
sign
saying.
too?
Yeah.
That's
Like, where do you get that sign? Who's producing those?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Trump
it-
USA.
like,
.com.
dude, an hour and a half, like south or west or yo, it's a whole new ball game, man.
Yeah, man.
Definitely, man.
That's why, like, Claudine asked me, like, so if you want to move somewhere else, where would you move? I'm like, wherever I move is going
North?
to be in the city.
Hey, look, north,
North?
I ain't
Maybe
gonna-
California in
shit
the
is-
city.
Actually,
That
you know
shit is
what?
still
Actually,
true.
Here's a funny story. It's a funny story. I had a person at work the other day. I was drinking I bought some bubble tea to work because you know just feeling some tapioca and some milk tea. And I'll sip it on that in the morning, and this dude comes up and was like, "Hey man, what are you drinking?" I was like, "Oh, it's milk tea." He's like, "Oh, what's that?" I was like, "It's tea with milk." You know what I'm saying? He's like, "Oh, where's that from?" I was like, "Oh, it's I guess it's like Chinese. It's from like Taiwan and stuff." You know what I'm saying? It's where it originated from. He goes, "Oh, I love Thai food."
On my face.
Oh man.
And I was
First
like,
off, I
was
don't need
like,
an inquiry.
I was like,
I don't need to
that's-
sit through an inquiry when
I
I
was
want to
like-
drink my goddamn bubble
It's
tea.
like that's not even the same country, bro. Taiwan and Thailand, like nah. So
It had the tie in it. They showed his necktie,
tried.
motherfucker. That don't
He
mean
tried.
Taiwanese
He tried.
invented that shit.
you know what? Back to like all these stories. I remember we're all off topic. But,
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, we're not following our transition thing, okay? So we need to have, like, a miscellaneous section. We need to have a miscellaneous
I think that's like the
section
end of every intro.
Yeah.
After the intro,
So I think this would be a
no
good time.
blooper reel.
So do y'all want to have the topic and any other thoughts on the Black History Museum?
y'all got to go check it
visit.
out. Go
Check
check
it
it out
out.
and take your time. Go twice. You know, I know it's hard to get tickets, but eventually you got to get in. If you haven't been, you have to go.
Do yourself a favor. Go.
Yeah.
A closing thought, man. I just love the city of DC, man. I think DC is it's a beautiful city. And I mean, go visit all the museums, man. All the Smithsonian museums. It's just a good time. And I definitely have to go back to the Black History Museum, man, because we didn't see
Also,
everything. And I
The
can't wait to go
cafeteria,
the
the
back.
fried chicken.
Oh my God, we didn't talk about the cafeteria.
We could have.
It was pricey.
Yeah, but
Hell
it's
yeah,
in the museum.
my God.
And they
But
don't
my,
charge you to get in, so they got to make their money somewhere. It's a gift shop and a
Yeah.
fucking cafeteria.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. But
So-
I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't know. What I
bought
had, the
2
fried
meals.
fish. That joint was
Catfish?
banging. The fried catfish sandwich.
I bought 2 meals. It was
That was
$50.
good.
So every 2 people was $50 to eat. You imagine, right?
If
I
you come
mean-
with kids, pack a lunch.
Oh, duh.
Smuggle that in, yeah.
I'm pretty sure they check you before you go
Biscuits
in.
gravy pretty good.
Can you bring a plate in there? Like if you had like chicken wings and some foil in your purse, would they let you in? Would they make you take the chicken wings out of your purse when you get on the airport and on the airplane?
I don't know.
I don't know. I never tried to smuggle food in, but it's not like I
They
can.
won't- you can-
It's not
you
like I
can-
can hijack a plane.
You can take your food
You
in.
can take whatever you want on the airplane, as long as it's not liquid.
Yeah, I'm about to say I can't hijack a plane
You
with
just
a chicken
can't bring
leg.
like a water or you drink
Throw it at the
anything.
dude's head.
Mm-hmm. All right,
I
so
drink a plane with a chicken wing.
I guess that's going to take us out on the African American History Museum.